Hello, everybody. I'm Austin Tichenor, and welcome to the Shakespeareance. Welcome to Shakespeareance 2. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to the Shakespeareance. Hi, Gene. If I could ask you to turn off your camera until we get to the Q&A portion of today's event. In just a few minutes. Thank you, sir. And I'm gonna mention your name in just a second. They first of all, they say that the even-numbered Star Trek movies are the best, and while I don't think that that's necessarily true for Shakespeare's plays, although I suppose we could talk about that. Henry IV Part 2, that's not better. Richard II, maybe he's better. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It definitely holds true for Shakespeareances so far. Before we begin our conversation, I do want to just give a shout out and thank my two newest supporters on Patreon. Stephanie Crognola is an actor and the host of the Protest Too Much podcast. Very funny, very fun, very interesting podcast that argues about best of issues and elements of Shakespeare's plays. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. And also, who you just glimpsed briefly, Gene Bate, a physician and artist in his own right, who is also very, very forward thinking in exploring the practicalities of the intersection between the healthcare industries and the arts. Thank you, Gene, for your support, and thank you for joining us today. Let me just say that this is being recorded. So if you'd rather not be seen on camera, just keep your cameras off when we get to the live Q&A. And if you're here with somebody you shouldn't be with, congratulations. But anyway, this will be recorded and possibly shown for the public later on. But if you have any questions and you can't stick around, please feel free to put your questions for Elizabeth or me in the chat, and we will get to the Q&A portion in just a moment. But first, let me now officially welcome to the Zoom screen Lieutenant Commander Shelby and Mistress Quickly herself, Elizabeth Dennehy. There she is. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Hello. Hi, everybody.
You've got the final frontier right there behind you.
It's lively, isn't it?
It's perfect. It is very lively. It's lovely there. I must say it's cold here in my basement. So if you allow me just 1 second, you guys can talk amongst yourselves or something. I just want to put on a little coat here because it's nice in the basement, especially in the summer, but it is a little cool. So I hope that is.
But do you have the built-in pecs like they had?
I don't have the built-in pecs nor the girdle. I guess I could do the cinch. This is now the second opportunity I've had to wear this. I got this for Ali Bosted and Davey Naylor's wedding, which was Star Wars themed, but I'm not going to waste any money buying Star Wars stuff.
Wow, that's Chris. They had a Star Wars wedding?
Yeah, they did. It was glorious. And it was on May the 4th. It was wonderful.
That is commitment.
Yeah, commitment to the bit, for sure. Well, and there have been many, many times over the years when Elizabeth has asked me for a donation to the various causes that she supports. And she's quite active and progressive and helpful in supporting the arts and education institutions. And I have said, Elizabeth, you can have a blank check if I could see you in that Starfleet uniform.
You do not want to see that. Trust me, you don't. I starved myself during those 2 episodes.
Well, great. I want to talk about. Let me just give folks an introduction to who you are. Okay, so. In 2366, Elizabeth Dennehy was assigned to Starfleet Tactical. She was in charge of Starfleet's tactical analysis and defense. of planning for the. No, I'm got this wrong. I'm sorry. Nope, that's my mistake. Elizabeth has acted on not on Broadway, but with Shakespeare and Co. and Tina Packer, the Williamstown Theater Festival, the New York Shakespeare Festival with Mr. Kevin Kline, Kennedy Center, the McCarter, Provincetown, and she now teach. Oh, and you're one of the original creators and cast members of Tony and Tina's Wedding, which is very cool. But now you're an extraordinary teacher of Shakespeare at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts in LA, and that's where you've been. That's where you've been really diving into Shakespeare most recently. Oh no, not most recently. Last weekend, you just played the title role in the Scottish play.
Yes, I did. You know, what happened was I've been teaching for 5 years at LACSA, Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. And when the pandemic happened, when it was stay at home, I don't know if you remember, the way it happened was March 13th, 2020. It was no gatherings of more than 100 people. Oh, we changed our mind, 50 people. Oh, 20 people, 25, 10 people. Like literally every day it changed. And we were a week away from teching our annual Shakespeare Palooza collection of Shakespeare scenes. So I had to learn Zoom. I had to learn the internet. I had to learn how to do Google Classroom and everything instantly. And so in order to facilitate that, what I did was, and you know, Austin, you were right there with me, signed up for every organization that was doing Shakespeare online that existed. And the Show Must Go Online was one of the first and you know, just soaked up everything because I had to learn how to do it. And so one of the groups, a couple of weeks ago, I auditioned for some group called Theater Mints doing Macbeth, thinking, oh, I'll get a witch. Maybe I'll get Duncan. I got himself. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. It was really fun, but exhausting.
Well, I think that's one of the you know, if we can look on find any bright notes in the last 18 months of the pandemic, it's this the openness with regard to casting. We've seen some really interesting actors in some roles that they might not necessarily get to play in real life, although maybe that has changed. Can you talk? I mean, you come from a theater family, an acting family. Your father is the late great Brian Dennehy. Did you grow up with Shakespeare? Was he a thing in your childhood?
Yeah, oh, massively. So one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people know is my dad did community theater. I mean, my father had a need to act and do it wherever he could. So it's really extraordinary when I think back on the fact that we grew up, he had 3 kids, and he created the Amityville Community Theater on Long Island, or ACT. And he did musicals. He played Tevye. He was a wonderful Tevye. He did Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls. So he would direct and star in shows. And we were little geezers. And one of my first memories was him doing The Tempest, directing The Tempest and playing Stefano. And we were the fairies. So we were always the no-neck monsters. We were the snow children. Whenever he needed kids in the show, that's what we did. I was Joe Egg in The Day and the Death of Joe Egg. So yeah, I mean, it's not like we were given a lot of choice. I suppose if I said I hate this, but I made him audition me for Fanny Bryce in Funny Girl. I was 13. I made him audition me. So yeah, we were bit pretty hard. And I remember being a fairy in The Tempest. There's a picture somewhere that we have been searching for of us backstage, and I haven't found it yet.
And and so, I mean, your father's big success came when he was almost middle-aged, kind of approaching 40.
He was 36 when he did Semi-Tough.
Okay. And was that an inspiration to you to do the same, or were you rebelling by becoming an actor?
Here's the funny thing. He always, and everybody in the business says it's really, really hard. It's really hard. You got to make sure you really want it. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I thought they were saying the work was really hard. And I was like, I love the work. The work is not hard. Acting is not hard. It's fun. They were talking about trying to get the work,
Yeah.
the life of an actor where you go to audition after audition after audition and you do really well and you don't get anything. That it was a few years before I realized, oh, that's what they were talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
collecting unemployment. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not fun.
The stuff we're constantly reminded about now. Well, and I remember interviewing. I mean, I met your dad a handful of times, but he was gracious enough to let me interview him for the RSC podcast and talking about O'Neill. And it was interesting to talk to him about the work, and it was the work that was clearly, I mean, at that stage in his life, maybe always, that was the important stuff, not so much the audience. The audience and the performances was like, well, we got to do that now. But really, it was being in the rehearsal room and investigating and exploring the text that was really the thing for him, right?
I mean, I think he really loved going out after the show.
Right.
I think that's aren't
It was
we all? Don't Isn't that why we all do it?
it was everything before and after the performance that he loved most.
Yeah, he loved rehearsing. There was one time where he called me and said, "I can't do this part. I quit. I quit." What I think he was really, really scared by A Touch of the Poet, which it's funny, he did so many O'Neill plays that started off at the Goodman, and I wish that that had moved because when you see something so good that you're actually terrified. It was terrifying.
Hmm.
He was, my sisters and I were just sobbing during that show, and I think he was scared. In the play, there's a character. He's actually awful. He's an awful husband and father. He treats his family terribly, and basically, in a nutshell, like taking an O'Neill saga and putting it in a nutshell, the mother and the daughter pray and wish for him to be nicer and more obsequious and kinder and compassionate, and they get what they wish for. So all of a sudden, he becomes this like groveling, kind of like a peasant with them, and it was harrowing. It was just
Wow.
really, it was hard to watch. And that one, I don't know why it didn't move. Maybe because it wasn't exactly an enjoyable night at the theater. It was something you endured.
Well, speaking of something that we did not have to endure, the Best of Both Worlds, parts 1 and 2 on Star Trek: The Next Generation, when you starred as Lieutenant Commander Shelby, and when we very first met for the very first time, you came to the tour of the kids, the school where the kids were playing, and I've been attending, and I recognized you and came up to you in a creepy way, as I think about it now, going, "Excuse me, aren't you Lieutenant Commander Shelby?" Because I was that nerd, and yet you didn't run screaming.
I
Don't remember. That's even better.
I do remember, but I always, every single time somebody recognized me, I'm blown away. I can't believe it. I can't believe. First of all, I had that awful hairdo, so I don't think I look like Shelby. And I'm always flattered. I'm always flattered. A little bit scared. Sometimes some people are, a little extra. But no, I honestly, this is going to sound so mean, and for Star Trek fans, I apologize. Um, I'm always amazed when people who I think are really smart are fans of the show. No, not anymore, but back then, see. Now I have to explain myself. When I was in high school, the people who watched the original series, I went to an all-girls school. So the people who were into Star Trek were nerds. They were real nerds. And when I first started doing Star Trek conventions, the people were people who were like, what was your phaser frequency set to when you went on the Borg ship? And I was like, dude. They were people who did not know that it was a show. I mean, ever since Comic-Con in San Diego, it's been cool. It's made that nerdiness cool.
Yeah.
But back then, when it first came, I mean, we're talking 30 years ago. Look at
Yeah.
how much being a fan, being a fanboy has changed and become kind of cool.
Absolutely.
It's
Can you
changed.
talk about how Star Trek came to you? How you got the gig?
It was just an audition. It was a day, just like any other day. I went on an audition. I didn't know anything about Star Trek. I didn't know who Riker was. I didn't know that Patrick Stewart was on it. I knew nothing. It was just, but I do remember, I'll never forget this. Joanna Pakula was in the room, and I recognized her because of Gorky Park that she had
Right.
done with my dad. And I was 27, so right off of the boat, new in LA, went to this audition, got a call back. Um, I remember being haughty and disdainful. Sorry, I'm sorry, guys. I was
Because
not.
what? Because you were a serious actor, or a Shakespearean, or not into
No,
sci-fi,
I
or just a
never
bitch.
was a bitch and haughty and full of myself. And um, whenever I go to Star Trek conventions and people will say to me, "If you weren't into sci-fi, what did you watch?" And I'm like, I was addicted to Brideshead Revisited, Six Wives of Henry VIII, Upstairs, Downstairs. I was an Anglophile. I loved the British period, Merchant Ivory. That was who I was.
So a different kind of costumed fantasy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I didn't, sci-fi didn't appeal to me at all.
And
Sorry. Yeah.
did you find that did any of the tricks of your theatrical trade or your Shakespearean training and background and aptitude, did that warp factor into your ability to memorize the techno babble or play pretend against a green screen at all?
I'm going to be really honest with you. They should have fired me. I was terrible.
Hmm.
I've told this at conventions. My first day, all right, remember I was 27. Think back, okay? The night before my first day of shooting, and I didn't know that you shot out of order. I didn't know what scenes they were going to shoot
Wow.
first. So I was like, well, my first scenes, I I don't have that many lines. The first day I showed up, the night before was the opening night of Tony and Tina's wedding in LA. Didn't get a lot of sleep.
Wow.
And I was not off book in any shape or form. I was used to the guiding light where you showed up, you had 40 pages, they would rehearse the entire show in order according to set. So if there were 8 scenes in the saloon, you would do those 8 scenes in order. So in the morning, I would show up, rehearse, then I would have all day to learn my lines. I had never done a nighttime, primetime show before. And so we got in the trailer and I was like, oh, this scene is first. And then I thought, okay, I have all day to learn it. And they lit it, you rehearsed it, went in makeup, and then they were like, we're ready for you. And I was like, oh my God, you're kidding me. And you know what scene it was?
What? Which?
Well, I'll never, never forget the lines now. Projections suggest that a Borg ship like this one could continue to function effectively, even if 78% of it were rendered inoperable. And I remember screwing it up and screwing up. I didn't know about master, and then they're going to be on you. You know, you're a theater major in school. They don't tell you, well, I think now they do.
Hopefully
They
they do
don't
now.
tell
Yeah.
you, they do not tell you about how it works at all. And I remember when my son got his first job, that Chicago Med, I was like, this is what happens. And he was like, Mom, they taught us all this in school, but I didn't learn any of this. So I'm thinking they do the master. I'm like, oh, thank God I got through that. Oh, no, no, no. Now it's your close up. Now we cover everybody else. I don't know why they didn't fire me. I was terrible. I was terrible that first day. And I can remember saying that line and screwing it up 50 times. And after the 50th time, Levar Burton went, and I thought, oh my God. I had no idea. I had no idea that it was going to be coming up that soon. Well, you better believe that night I went home and freaking memorized. Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Sure, why not?
I memorized that entire show because again, I didn't know what, now they email you the call sheets, they email you the shooting order, but you just showed up and you were handed this call sheet and the scene order, and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. I was terrible. So unprofessional. Thank God for Jonathan Frakes. He was so nice to me. He knew, he could tell that I was really green. He could tell that I was really nervous. Took me under his wing, said, my trailer is your trailer. We went in there, we ran lines constantly, and I never messed up again after that first day.
That's very cool. That's very cool of him, and he is clear. I mean, he's gone on to be quite a successful director as well, and those impulses he showed working with you, and fun too, because you guys, the two of your characters, were going at it so much. I mean, we can there are so many different levels and depths to which we can descend in our conversation and dissection of
There's
that
something else
episode.
there's something else I need to mention, which is something that I learned on the soap opera, which is when you're doing a scene, when we only had the first half of the script, so we didn't get the second half. We had no idea what was going to happen. So I
Right.
was
You mean the first episode of the
the first
two-part
episode.
episode? Yeah.
We only had the first episode. We had no idea. So he and I would talk a lot about we have to play that anything could happen because anything could happen. I could have been a Borg in disguise, a Matahari, like double agent. We could have ended up in falling in love with each other. We just had no idea. So one of the first things he said, we need to like play a little bit of heat here in case something like that happens. And I was like, oh yeah, right. You're just trying to and he was like, no, 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 I'm serious. And it was the same with the guiding light. You'd be having a huge fight scene with somebody, and then the next week you were in bed together. So you kind of have to play very three-dimensionally and leave as many doors open as possible and all these options. So a lot of times people would say, oh my God, I hated you, when you would go, like when I what was this thing? Changed the phaser frequencies and it worked. The tractor, the shield broke,
Yeah.
and that little face I make of like, because I didn't know if I was going to end up being a villain. So we had to plant the seeds for any eventuality to come true.
Well, and I want to talk about this later.
Okay.
But remind me that I want to ask you about how you were used as maybe a contractual ploy for some of the other actors. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
But this will probably be the first question it will certainly be mine. What about the Patrick Stewart of it all? Did you get to interact with him much? Did you see any of the Shakespearean greatness of Patrick Stewart in his portrayal of Jean-Luc Picard?
I wish that I had hung out with him more. Everybody was kind of frantically trying to learn lines all the time. The other thing that some people don't realize about TV land is this was the last episode of a season. And I don't know if you've ever shot a last episode. They are done. They are tired. They've done 26 episodes and it's the last one. So it's the martini. So like the martini of the martini. They're just like, I remember him being very charming, really delightful, very funny, very irreverent. Like I got there and I'm like all, ready to be all Shelby. And when they said, oh, we get hit, the ship gets hit. Is it a 4? Is it a 5? Is it a 10? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, literally like the reactions. And I thought, this is what you do? It's like cowboys and Indians. It's ridiculous. You really literally are playing pretend. So they had a lot of fun joking around about that kind of stuff.
I love it because we still haven't installed seat belts on the Enterprise. We've got to do all this stuff.
The other thing that was cute about him was, I think I can say this. He had just, Jenny Hetrick, who's a friend of mine, had just done her episode, like before that, and they started a thing.
This is Vash. You're referring to Vash.
I guess. I don't know. I've never watched the show before or since. I have no idea. But so he was asking me all about her, and I thought that was kind of cute because that was right when they met and started up. The other thing that was funny about him, and I don't know if Brent Spiner will be watching this, but he kept trying to match me and Brent up. He was like, I think the two of you should go on vacation together. And Brent didn't talk to me for the whole rest of the episode because he was so embarrassed. But it's very sweet. Very cute.
Well, that's motivation enough for me to send this to Brent Spiner and get it.
I've seen Brent many times since then, and I don't bring it up. So because he's married, he's got kids and everything. But
we're all happy. We're all happy. Well, yeah. And I was realizing, looking through some of your other credits, like you've worked at the Antaeus Theater Company in LA, which it seems every member of that theater company has been through the Star Trek universe as well.
Yes, yes.
Armin Shimmerman, Harry Groener, etc.
It's crazy. I mean, when people say there's 6 people in the business, this is I met. So one of the first jobs when I moved to LA was this, and then I got a play down at South Coast Rep, and Rosalind Chow's husband was in that play. So Simon Templeman and Rosalind and I became really, really good friends. And then totally by coincidence, James came down to see that play because Barbara Dowling was married to Colin Meaney.
Right.
So Colin Meaney and Rosalind Chow, their spouses were in the play. I mean, it's just crazy. So, and then Michelle Forbes and I were dressing roommates on The Guiding Light, and then moved out to LA, and then she did, her thing with Deep Space Nine. I think her thing was
Also Star Trek, also Next Generation, Ensign Ro.
Yeah.
Ro Laren and Miles O'Brien. And what was Miles's wife's name? Keiko, maybe, I want to say.
So we all are friends with each other outside of work. Simon, Roz's husband, is my son's godfather. I mean, we're really, really good friends. We flew to London to see Roz do a play at the National in 2017. Yeah.
Cool. And Mia Gosling in the chat has confirmed that it is Keiko O'Brien.
Colin Meaney and James, my husband, have been friends since they were teenagers.
You had us over for dinner once, Dee and I over for dinner, and Colin was there, and I want to say Michelle was there, and Gabe Byrne was there. It was and I was too, usually I'm obnoxious with.
Who was the other name?
Gabe Byrne? Gabriel Byrne, wasn't he there, or did he couldn't make it?
Probably not. Michelle was probably talking about him because they were probably doing that show together in therapy.
In treatment, I think. Yeah.
In treatment, yeah.
All right. Well, now we've totally just gone into gossip. So let us open up the chat to. We've got 4 people in the chat today. If folks would like to turn their cameras on and join the conversation, please feel free to do that. If you have questions and you just want to submit them in the chat, we can do that. Do it that way too.
One thing that I wanted to say is that so there's another line that I use in my class when I teach Shakespeare, is when you have a line with a lot of S sounds, that you have to separate each S word from. Otherwise, it's just, and I use separate the saucer section, assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion as one of my lessons. That line killed my brain, learning that line.
But that's a great vocal exercise. Every actor should have to do that. Well, and this is the thing too, and I would tell this to the young actors I worked with before Next Generation came on. This is still in the 80s now, or just before. Some of them were looking down on the fact that we were doing children's theater in this summer stock program in New Hampshire, so you'd have to pretend, there's a dragon, there's a thing. And I was just going, you'll be lucky if you get to be in a movie someday where you're pretending to see some space monster or something. I guess my point is children's theater is great training, but theater generally, this is why Star Trek hired a lot of not just theater actors, but classically trained actors because of their ability to articulate heightened language. And this technobabble, while nonsense, is also heightened in its way.
You have to have a lot of technique to do that. You really do. And I learned the hard way. I really did. I was really young and stupid. But separate the saucer section, assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. Now I can do it for muscle memory, but it took hours and hours to make it sound like that's the way I talk.
Yeah, that's funny. That's great. Do you, Mia has the first question in the chat, which she acknowledges is a pretty standard question on the Q&A rounds, but it's not, I don't think. What is your favorite moment, Elizabeth? Do you have one in a Shakespeare play, and why?
Oh my God, my head is just filled.
Try to pick one. It's hard.
Well, it's so hard to separate the moment in the script from productions I have seen.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the first thing that pops in my mind, and Austin, you and I have the similar moment, when the Autolycus bear scene in the Goodman production of Winter's Tale was mind-blowing.
Very moving.
Mind-blowing.
Not comic, but tremendously moving. Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know how they got a bear suit and somebody to move. So you guys know Exit Pursued by Bear, and it's always kind of like a joke. With the way they did it with the thunder noise and the baby crying, and then that suit looking so real, and then him sacrificing himself. Here lies the chase. Mind blowing, mind blowing. Another moment that I really love is in Richard III when Clarence is. I love Clarence. Oh, so hard to pick. I love Clarence's murder. I love Clarence's speech before his murder. But when the family realizes that Clarence has been killed, the King Edward has an amazing speech. I love
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah, those are great moments. Kate Pitt is asking, can you talk about teaching Shakespeare to students? How do you start? And what age are you teaching now? They're sophomores, right?
Yes, they are 10th graders. And how do you start is the $1 million question. I'm lucky because I teach in an arts high school. So these students come from all over Los Angeles. It's a free tuition free school, but conservatory style. So I know I'm getting kids who are actively pursuing theater. They've auditioned to get into the school. They're a little bit more prepared than just a regular public school where I just have to go in and cram Shakespeare down their throats.
Right.
And some are more enthusiastic than others. Um, the first thing we have to do is really find a glossary of words so that we're all speaking the same vocabulary. I find that is the most important jumping off point because you've got kids from all over LA. And believe it or not, the Los Angeles public school system, which is 46 in the nation in per pupil spending, is not wonderful. And so I get some kids who don't know what a syllable is. Kind of hard to teach Shakespeare if you don't know what a syllable is. So we spend the first few weeks figuring out what the difference between a noun and a verb is so that when I say play the verb, let's really make sure we're making speeches as active as possible. What are you actually doing that they know what we're talking about? So we spend a good while talking about that. And then we get into prose versus
Poetry.
prose versus poetry and talk about iambic pentameter. And some classes I can get really go into the weeds and do trochees and spondies and all the different meters. And when we are able to do that, I'll put a line of text on the board like she doth teach the torches to burn bright, and then have the kids divide up the speech into feet, and then have the kids yell out, do a spondy, trochee, spondy, and have the kids try. And it's a great way to, so it's sort of like
Wow.
becomes the price is right with different feet, different
The
structures.
Price is Right approach to teaching Shakespeare. That's a good manual to publish. Well, and you've asked me to sit in on some of the coaching with some of your kids, and I'm amazed at how poised your students are. And I guess maybe some of that is because they want to be actors and they have a kind of a presence. But I mean, I have to attribute a lot of that confidence and swagger that they have to whatever you're giving them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I try. I try. I think the hardest thing at that age is they get so caught up in their social drama. And of
Yeah.
course, we've been on Zoom for 18 months, which is so, so hard. And my job, I'm trying to get them to keep their eye on the ball. Remember, you want letters of recommendation from me. In 2 years' time, you're going to be asking me for audition monologues. So
Yeah.
they need to start planting the seeds now. The 10th graders, they're 2 years before that, they were in eighth grade. Only 2 years before, they were 13-year-old eighth graders.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get them to focus 2 years from now on being a senior.
Yeah. That is so much happens in those 3 years, 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Mia asks a follow-up. What plays and characters have you found that students respond to the most?
So what you always have in class, that's a great question. Kids who are like, I'm gonna hate this, I'm gonna hate this. And sometimes they're more determined than you are, and you just have to let them go. But what I'll do with kids who are having trouble this year, I've already figured out what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with Lance's second speech about Crab the dog farting under the table. That's always to start with something that's really, really accessible, easy to understand, and have so that they can be like, oh my God, I had no idea that was going to be so fun. Last year was great because the PBS released the all black Much Ado About Nothing that they recorded in at the Delacorte, and I made them watch it before the first day of school and write a report on it. And every single one of them said, "Oh my God, I had no idea that Shakespeare could sound like my family, that it was like a party with my family." So that was a gift from God. I hope to God they make that available again. So when I have kids who are really leery, I will give them Richard III, Macbeth. They really enjoy playing those the villainous characters. Girls like sinking their teeth into Queen Margaret. Um, Romeo and Juliet. So in our everything leads towards the evening of Shakespeare scenes, and I like to have a mix of familiar and unfamiliar. We always start with the balcony scene because I think that's Romeo and Juliet is people when people who don't know anything about Shakespeare, they'll know Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo. We'll like start with that scene, and then I'll go to Hubert and Prince Arthur where he's about to kill him, because
Wow.
that's a scene that a lot of people don't know about, and it is like the most suspenseful that could be in Game of Thrones. And so to go from the balcony scene into that scene, a lot of people are like, "Oh my God." And I'll read a synopsis of that scene to the kids and then not tell them how it ends and be like, "Well, you got to read it. We want to find out what's going to happen." So I try to mix accessible and familiar with, then we'll do like Measure for Measure, which is, the Angelo, Isabella, the themes that come out there very much on people's minds, especially young people. And we'll, talk about what's going on. And the other thing that I like to, as you know, Austin, I like to start the year off with the Sir Thomas More speech, which could have been written, could have been written yesterday, but
Right.
certainly within the last 5 years, just so they can, because I always feel like I have to prove Shakespeare's relevance, especially now. And I'm an old white lady teaching an old dead white playwright. So when we talk about the moments when Shakespeare spoke truth to power, that really resonates with them.
That's very cool. Well, and you sort of answered Mia's follow-up question, which is, should the history plays be taught more in school? And you are doing that. Mia also says, "Can I take your class, please?"
I'd love for you to. I'd love for you to. So, at the end of the year, what I say to them is, I love Shakespeare. You may not end up at the end of the year loving Shakespeare, but at least you won't be afraid of it anymore. If you pick up a text, you'll be able to tell, is this prose? Is this in verse? And, dum de dum de dum de dum de dum, what works for you, what doesn't, read up, power up at the end. You'll know what to do and you won't be freaked out. So that's my goal.
Kate Pitt asks, how was playing Macbeth?
Oh my God. First of all, I was so daunted. And you have no rehearsal and it's on Zoom. And so I had to really, you know, I found out 2 weeks before we did the show, and I could have spent every waking minute, trying to learn the soliloquies. And I decided I had other things going on, like root canal and, a kid graduating from college. So I had a lot of other things going on. So I was
Tomorrow.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I just thought I will make sure I understand what I'm saying, do my research. What's interesting about Macbeth, and you and I talked about this a little bit, Austin, is you don't really get to see him be a tyrant. He
No.
does things on the slide. Well, nobody knows that or at least says, we figured out that he killed Duncan. Oh, we figured out that he killed Banquo. It's one of those things like you look at the things people say about you, people talk about him. So I'm like, oh God, I guess I better show myself becoming tyrannical. And basically what I did was I watched Patrick's version, which I thought was excellent, and stole everything that I could. So I just decided to do a really decent Zoom reading of the play. Nothing was memorized. And just tried to do a reading and serve the text. And I changed a little things here and there to make it clearer. But one thing that was a major realization for me, that kind of was a key that unlocked a lot, was I've seen this play so many times. And when the girl who was playing Lady Macbeth and I figured out that the plan was to kill Duncan with the chamber servants' daggers and leave them there, so everybody was going to think that they did it. The plan was not to kill them.
Right.
That
Right.
was not the plan between Lady M and himself. He, I think, in a moment of panic, when Macduff says, "Go look," did that because he panicked, and then she faints to cover it up. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
And so that impulsiveness and that fear and like not very smart, that's not a very smart thing to do, was a key that unlocked the character for me a lot.
That's maybe that is the answer to what is Macbeth's tragic flaw. He's an idiot and he panicked.
I honestly think that they need to be young people. I think it's natural born killers. It needs to be Juliette Lewis. We can do this because smarter, older people, I think, would go, we're not going to be able to get away with this. I think they need to be really young.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, the other thing I've just discovered is that Macbeth is what the shortest tragedy, but it's got 29 scenes in it. You know, it's horribly chopped up. It's chopped up like King Duncan. It feels like a movie text. I mean, it's one of the great things about teaching it is that it really moves, so young people, can follow it, can track it, what's
Yeah,
going on.
yeah.
Um,
And also a lot of the soliloquies, all those soliloquies, like if it were done and to be thus, all sort of like, fear and doubtful and insecure. And I made a decision, and I don't think I'm the first one to do this, that the dagger, is this a dagger which I see before me, is Macbeth's "Come, you spirits who tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here." The dagger is like, he's pointing me where to go. This is an affirmation. This is validation. I'm doing the right thing. Because I
right.
didn't want all of the soliloquies to be, what should I do? What should I do? I was boring myself. So
Yeah. Yes, always a thing to avoid. Mia asks that talks about Mistress Quickly, who you have called Hostess Quickly. And I don't know whether that's a distinction that's important to you or the production, but which version did you do of her? Was this Henry IV, both Henry IVs, or
Well,
was it Mary?
this is a kind of funny story. One of my first jobs when I got out of school, I graduated from Lambda, moved back to New York, and got cast as an understudy in Kevin Kline's Henry V. And I understudied Christine Nielsen, who played the French Queen and Hostess Quickly in Henry V. So, and I was like, at the time, I was like, 23 years old, hostess quickly, all right, whatever. I never got to go on, but I knew the part. And then at Antaeus, they did Henry IV Part 1, just Part 1.
Okay.
And I auditioned and played Quickly and Vernon. And that was fun.
Wait, who's Vernon?
Vernon is in Hotspur's group. Vernon is the one who gets put to death with Worcester.
Oh, right. Yes, right. Right.
Because they don't convey the peace offering from the king.
Cool. And Mia confirms Quickly and Vernon is a great double.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And is Quickly just comic relief in Henry IV? Um, hmm. I mean, I think if I was directing it, I think that there's an opportunity to show a maternal side, to show Hal. Maybe she's like a maternal figure to Hal. He always goes there and she dotes on him and looks after him. That was kind of what I was doing
Mm-hmm.
anyway, was seeing, you never see Hal's mom or a maternal person there. But, and then in part two, they get into all that with Doll Tear Sheet and all that. So I
Right.
didn't get to do that part. But, I played, my Falstaff was Gregory Itzin, and that was a lot of fun. And Stephen Caffrey.
Wow, double. Yeah, two opposite two. You mentioned another great tip for young actors, which is to steal from the best. You stole from Patrick Stewart, his Macbeth. How valuable is it, and what have you learned from watching other actors do this? Like, what was it like to watch Kevin Kline do Henry V? What have you learned and picked up from seeing other people do it?
Oh, man. Kevin, it was really interesting. I think Kevin Kline is a clown with leading man looks. I mean, we're talking 1984.
Yeah.
He was much more comfortable with the wooing of the French princess, who was Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, and made that scene hilarious. And I feel like he was an amazing Henry, but it wasn't his natural intuition to be this leading man and this leader. I felt like he always is looking for the humor. I think he's a clown in stuck in a leading man's body.
You'll pardon the expression, but I love his bottom in the film. Uh,
Yeah, oh, he always teased me because he's Juilliard and I was Lambda, and I wore my Lambda sweatshirt, and he'd go, "Oh, Lambda." I honestly can't remember rehearsal learning. I mean, I had just graduated from Lambda, so it was like, this is what we do. Not a method actor, not, there were method actors in that production, people who needed to feel it before they could do it. And you're like, okay, anytime. But no, he was great. He just, journeyman actor, and it's so much fun to do shows there.
yeah.
I did get to fight in the battle. This is hilarious. So I'm on the board of the Independent Shakespeare Company in Griffith Park, and one of my board members, John Bauman, was my fight partner in that show. He actually sliced open my pinky one day. um,
This Mia asks another question. You seem to use the histories in class a lot. Is there something about them that are particularly conducive to working with students? Parentheses, sorry, huge history play nerd, trying to convince everyone else they're the best plays.
I would love to do more. I would love to. I only teach on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I have half the class for 70 minutes, then I have the other class for 70 minutes. And when you're teaching kids what a syllable is, what a playwright is, and I want you to be really to understand me. I'm not saying that the students are not smart. I fault the public school system.
Right.
I'm talking to kids who speak multiple languages. When I did my Sir Thomas More, that speech, that video, I think we had something like 20, and every kid did a different language. I think we had something like 20 languages. They have a literacy that I don't have. I just don't have the time. I would love, for instance, for 1 year to do a Henriette, to do the whole thing from Richard II, choice scenes. I wish I saw them every day. Then it might be possible. So for our smorgasbord of scenes, there's just so many great scenes, from those plays. Like, I love having girls do the Howlin' Hotspur fight. Um, and I've done the Talbot and Joan of Arc in fight scene with two girls, a mix of comedy and drama, and just juicy scenes that kids can sink their teeth into. I love the histories, but I wish I could do more.
That's a great. I champion Mia's goal to making the history plays more um, uh, uh, seen by other people, and now she says, ugh, now I really want to take your class.
I mean, who doesn't want to play Joan of Arc,
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can you talk a little bit about like Shakespeare and Star Trek, the intersection of Shakespeare and popular culture, and whether that is helpful to you as a teacher in talking to your students about Shakespeare? Like, I know that you did a version of MIDSUMMER where the mechanicals or the fairies were sort of a Marvel superheroes or something like that.
We had an idea. I stole it from when I went to the Globe. The Globe Theater has a teaching program that's phenomenal. It's 3 weeks, and it's teaching teachers how to teach Shakespeare. And at the end, it culminated in a scene where the rehearsal scene, that scene where Ariel met, from Ariel met to lead him to my bower. So when Titania wakes up, and we were talking about how funny it would be if Cobweb was Spider-Man, and I was like, oh my God, I love that idea so much that I stole it from those rehearsals and came back, and I thought my kids would love that. So we did it at a Shakespeare festival, and Mustard Seed was just in a Power Rangers. They were all in Power Rangers and superhero Incredibles. What do you call it? Morph suits with tutus and fairy wings,
Nice.
just based on Cobweb being Spider-Man. And when she said, "Tie up my love's tongue," the girl doing Spider, she went like this. And then what we wanted to have was actually string coming out and then tying up bottom, but we didn't have time to rehearse that. But I still think it's an amazing idea.
Your special effects budget was limited.
Yeah.
But do you find an intersection there? It's funny. It's interesting that Mia talks about the history plays, because I've in the last couple of years have since the Hollow Crown really have decided I really want to see. I don't want to see 4-hour plays. I don't want to see 2-hour versions of reductions of plays. I want to see these history plays and maybe some of the tragedies as 6-episode miniseries, 6-hour-long episode miniseries where you can give each plot line the attention it deserves, all the resources, hire all the best actors for all the roles, not just the leading roles. That's how I really want to approach these plays, and I wonder how that helps you get the kids into Shakespeare.
You want Succession.
Yeah, Succession. Yeah, Succession is right. Yeah.
I think that I think showing. I think you have to start small. You have to pick a scene, and have them paraphrase it and put it into their own words, and then have them try to find parallels. For nowadays, like when we're talking about Joan of Arc, for instance, I will often use God, I'm blanking on her last name. Greta.
Who is she?
Thunberg, Greta Thunberg.
Sure.
I'm just blanking on her last name.
Yeah.
Who's a young girl who doesn't care what if she pisses off the grown-ups, right? So try to find parallels like that to modern day. Something that I think that you would love. I did this crazy thing. The International Theater of Amsterdam, Ivo van Hove's company. They do these plays. Kings of War was the first thing that I watched. They streamed it, and it was modern adaptations of, and super condensed, Henry IV, Henry V, the Henry VIs, and Richard III. Mind-blowing, incredible, really, really wonderful. I mean, the guy playing Richard III, Hans Kesting, was on the phone talking to Trump at one point when he thought he was going to become king. He was like practicing. It was so good. Their work is wonderful. And I think that those could have been chopped up. Then they also did the Roman trilogy, which was Coriolanus, Julius Caesar, and Antony and Cleopatra. Their work is fantastic.
But don't all the characters have to be in their bare feet while it's raining blood or something? Isn't that a thing? And all of
that's on View from the Bridge. No,
okay.
They're all in suits, and they're all in press rooms and campaign offices. Incredible. Like I watched the Kings of War. And then something happened with their transmission, so they gave us the link, and I made James and William watch it. They loved it. They loved the shows. I highly recommend their stuff. International Theater of Amsterdam. For like £12, I had to get up at 6 a.m. and watch from 6 a.m. till like noon, but I was riveted. Their shows are really great. So I think modern adaptations are great. You know me, I really can't stand Greek theater. I did Phaedra in college, and I have a massive PTSD from that experience. And they did an updated, modernized version of Oedipus that I was like, okay, all right, I can take this. It was so good.
Yeah. I mean, if it seems foreign, if there's a way to make it present and meaningful and some sort of bridge between you and the material. I mean, I'm all for any of that. We've got there is no time limit, but we've been talking for 55 minutes. And if
So,
anybody,
one of the things I really talked about with the kids, when talking about what you're talking about, is a speech like Amelia's speech in Othello. Could be written now, and and that I've taken all these like constantly taking classes. McClure Taylor's, using your authentic voice is so important for me to tell my kids. Use your authentic voice. We want you to sound like you. So I think that's the way to get in with kids, is that there's no right way, there's no wrong way. Nobody's going to tell you. Netta, my son's girlfriend, who is this amazing actress, a woman of color, was told in college that in Shakespeare, well, yes, well, you can play Cleopatra.
oh,
How could you do that to somebody? This is recent.
oh yeah. I met Netta because we all went down to see King Lear in St. Louis on Tuesday, and she endeared herself immediately to me because not only is she super nice and everything, but she revealed that the very first play she ever saw was the complete works on video in her 8th grade English class. And in Jacksonville, Florida. And it was exactly what you said your kids saw when they watched the
Much
Much Ado
ado.
About
Yeah.
Nothing, which is like they are watching it going, and she said this, I didn't know you could do that to Shakespeare, with Shakespeare.
Right.
And so I said, well, and Daisy, my daughter, was there, and she said, you just made his day. But it's wonderful that a mind can be blown. A mind is what's a precious thing to waste. A mind is too important not to be blown. I don't know. I'm workshopping that saying. Does anybody else have any questions? Because Elizabeth, you have given me so much of your time here, and I really,
I could talk about this stuff forever.
I know that's the glory of it.
Austin and I talk about Shakespeare constantly.
Even when the microphone
Oh,
isn't going.
here's a funny follow up to the Macbeth thing.
Yeah.
So I did this weekend shows, and it was 10 a.m. my time, which was inhuman.
Yeah.
And because I have to put contacts in and all that, it's a big deal. So I was like, that's it. I am done. No more Zoom theater for me. I don't care what part it is. And they sent me an email saying, "Oh, we loved working with you so much. How do you feel about Lear?"
Hello.
And I said to Rob Miles, I told him that, and he said, "You can't say no to that."
No, you can't. No, you can't. Oh, if only you're still decades away. Decades, 30, 40 years away.
Lear is a piece of cake compared to Macbeth. I got to tell you, Macbeth never shuts up. Never shuts up. Oh, it would be like, well, I do one soliloquy, to be thus, but to be safely thus, and it's like, oh my God, now I have the murderer scene. Then after the murderer scene, you have the feast scene. It's an exhausting part.
Yeah, Lear's a piece of cake. Well, I can't wait to see your Lear. I can't wait to see you in person. If there are no other questions, Mia says one last bit of advice: never play a title character. That's good advice for the kids at home.
I know what I wanted to say. When I was thinking about this ahead of time, and I was thinking about what could I say, what could I talk about, and this is going to sound really, really corny, but I think Austin, you'll get this. I feel like my father's with me when I do these things. Like James is like, what are you doing? What do you get? And I just find myself saying, okay, what would my dad do here? Yeah. And does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes 100% sense. You talked many times that it looked like, oh, well, it looks like my dad's not going to be able to do Lear now. And that is sad. I would have loved to have seen that, but now maybe someday we'll get to see yours, and that's really exciting to me. I mean, seriously, I think that's very cool.
I'm doing it for him.
Doing it for him. Yeah, doing it for him. Elizabeth Dennehy is Brian Dennehy doing Lear. I keep trying to end this, and you keep talking, and it's beautiful, and I love it, and I thank you for it. If anybody else has any questions, shove them down in the chat right now. And if not, I want to thank you for joining us. Thanks, Leilani. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Kate Pitt. Thank you, Jean. If anybody wants to turn their camera on so we can see their face and say bye, great. And if you don't, that's cool too. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I hope you'll tell your friends, hey, look at me.
Hey, there you go.
Yes. Very good. Thank you, Jean. And I hope that other people can join us. If you thought this was fun, please tell your friends about. I don't know what we're going to do next month, but hopefully it'll be something fun like this. Thank you all for doing this. Bye.